What's good, folks? Welcome to another episode of the Cover One Film Room, the show that gives you the hows and the whys behind both the good and the bad of the Buffalo Bills. I'm one of your two hosts this evening, Anthony Prohaska, joined as always by Mr. Erik Turner. And Erik, we got some more super enthralling, exciting Bills OTA stuff that I'm sure
Yeah.
everybody just wants to pour through. But it's been a little quiet on that side, and I think we've got a really fun episode tagged and set up for tonight in terms of looking at Dalton Kincaid, looking at what he potentially can be and how he can be maximized in this offense, and relating it to some of the other tight ends that are being maximized league wide as we're I don't want to say we're in like a tight end renaissance, but the impact level of tight ends really the past like decade or so, starting with like once what Gronk and Aaron Hernandez started to do, and then Kelce and Andrews and Kittle and
Yeah.
what Porta was, and now Brock Bowers being in his rookie year. We'll see what Michael Mayer is in year two. That tight end position becoming seemingly more important and always being, you say this all the time, still being that ultimate kind of trump card or ultimate
Yeah.
mismatch creator in football today. So it'll be nice to kind of dive into this episode, considering the Bills have a tight end like that who they could potentially maximize and use to create mismatches.
Yeah, they have two very solid tight ends if you're looking relative to the league. And we expect them to utilize those guys this season. And what's fun about this episode is we're going to take a look at some Dalton Kincaid film, kind of go back to his rookie season, but also kind of highlight and show how Joe Brady can maximize Dalton Kincaid and the Bills tight ends, and show you like how they can do it relative to the league, what other teams are doing. I went back and I studied all of the film, a lot of the film, red zone, play action, every single touchdown by every tight end in the league. And I brought some to the film room tonight to kind of show you guys how those top tier tight ends, those teams that are heavy tight end personnel, how they use them in different areas of field and in different roles. So it's gonna be a fun one. We're gonna have a bunch of film from Sam Laporta, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, and of course Dalton Kincaid. So buckle in. It's going to be a fun episode. It's one that's a little different, but this is what the summer's for, the off season's for. You're not just scouting the team last year and kind of projecting what can happen in the next season, but you're also having to reset your eye from a scouting perspective and see some of the trends around the league, but also some of the new talent that's getting thrown into the league and how they're being used. And so that's why this episode is going to be super fun.
That's a tremendous point. We talk about it so much in season, but the off season is like we talk about those trends, and of course, like, hey, like the advent of two high coverage structures and yada yada. But this is when we do that work and kind of dive into it. And I'm excited for this episode as well, just not just for Kincaid, but being able to go back and watch these offenses again to get some more details. And their offenses, like we see a ton of during the regular season, but just even without thinking of doing this episode, like in February and March, and how much tape I was watching on the Ravens offense and different Niners stuff. And I was watching a bunch of Lions tape this offseason just because I like Sam Laporta, but their offensive line and what they do out of 11 personnel and how that ties into what we're seeing league trend wise. So there's a lot of fun cyclical football information in this episode in terms of how offenses are moving, how they're trying to swing the pendulum back in their favor after defenses kind of took it the past couple of years, and how that ties into the Buffalo Bills. And talking about that piece and how it ties into the Buffalo Bills, really maximizing Dalton Kincaid comes down to that passing game piece. And Erik, when we talk about this Bills offense, when we talk about the Bills passing game, we've alluded to it on Twitter, and I know we've spoken about it here on the show, and I've even said it on Disguise coverage. It really feels like this year is kind of a bet on Joe Brady with what they've done, and the ceiling of this offense, holistically, schematically, structurally, however you want to verbalize it, really lies in Joe Brady's hands and is really on his shoulders to push the right buttons at the right time, pull the right levers at the right time, and really set up this offense for success and maximize how this roster's been built on that side of the ball.
Yeah, in many ways, they decentralized their identity when it came to the passing game by trading away Stephon Diggs. And you can even say it started happen, when Brady took over and how they had Josh Allen kind of distribute more instead of just looking to his go-to guy in Diggs. And so you saw that kind of decentralized, and you heard Diggs talk about it in his presser the other day, how he kind of felt like a trade was coming on. And there were even one of the national analysts last year, in the back half of last year, said that they're trying to force Diggs out. Maybe that guy was right at this point.
Kevin
And
McCourty, I think
was it McCourty?
it was McCourty.
Yeah. And so you saw Josh Allen start to distribute it more. And of course, that's the talk everyone's going to eat this year. It's all you've heard this offseason. And that's why it lies in Joe Brady's hands, right? It's up to him to scheme these guys open. It's up to him to put these guys in positions to succeed, regardless of if they're a rookie or if they're a 3rd or 5-year vet in the league. He's going to have Josh Allen and put those pieces in place so that Josh can be that point guard and distribute and make this offense more multidimensional and more difficult to defend. And, when we talk about, how to defend an offense, when you talk about the number one mismatch, it's a tight end. And it's when a tight end comes in or a tight end comes out, it's one of the first things that the defense is doing, trying to match that personnel. We always talk about, hey, 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. Like, that is the first thing that a D coordinator and the defense and everyone on that staff is calling out, what personnel is in the game for the offense. So, as we said, the Bills have 2 solid tight ends, and it's going to be interesting to see how they use them. But before we can move forward, Anthony, we got to look back to last year and kind of get an idea, especially when you're talking Joe Brady taking over, how they use Kincaid, how they use these tight ends, and not just how they used them, but relative to the league. So we got some stats courtesy of True Media. And so we're going to start with expected points added, Anthony, in team target percentage. So bottom of the screen, you're going to see team target percentage. You can see where Dalton Kincaid ranks against some of the, again, I picked some of these names because they're tight end oriented offenses. They're, maybe first or second targets in their offenses. And you can see that Dalton Kincaid's team target percentage was pretty good. All things considered, when you look at when he was playing under Dorsey versus Brady, it ended up, pretty well, up over 15% in team target percentage. But you can see he is below EPA per target. So he's below average when it comes to that, relative to some of those big names that you see, like Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, and rookie Sam Porta.
Yeah, those other offenses that you have highlighted there based on the tight ends, really, and I think you nailed it with how you labeled it, like those tight end centric offenses. Maybe Laporta a little bit. That offense goes through Amon-Ra St. Brown and the run game, but Laporta was such a significant part of it. And then we know what Travis Kelce is. We know how important George Kittle is. Mark Andrews for forever has been like the entire passing offense for the Baltimore Ravens. Yeah. And yeah, like to see how Kincaid is represented in that, I feel like it's not talked about enough. Just, you have it from a percentage standpoint, but he finished second, and from a regular season perspective, on the Bills in targets last year with 90. It's still wild to look back on it though and see Stephon Diggs had 159 targets last year for the Bills, and Kincaid was second there with 90. So he had a healthy representation last year from a volume standpoint or from a percentage standpoint, like we have shown there. He was also second on the team in receptions with 73. And then it felt like once Brady took over, we saw more of a focus or attention to get Dalton Kincaid the ball. Now, whether it was because of Kincaid himself or whether it was because they were to, use your words earlier, they were trying to decentralize that offense from Stephon Diggs, and Kincaid was just, the top or first benefactor along with Khalil Shakir potentially. We'll see what comes of it this year. But overall, that you see his percentage, you see his representation, how things changed under Brady, and then putting that amongst or against the landscape of what trends we're seeing in this league. I think it points to him potentially trending upward going into 2024.
Yeah, and when Brady took over, we did see that rise in team target percentage. And team target percentage is his target percentage among his own team. So, again, it's going to be relative to Stephon Diggs. Like you just mentioned, Stephon Diggs, James Cook, and those guys, because James Cook's numbers went up as expected when Brady took over as well. So we move on to yards per route run along with team target percentage. And again, you can see him just below average when it comes to, yards per route run and whatnot. But you can see, again, if he's going to take that step in year 2, the area that he needs to get to and those guys that he's up against relative to the league, you're gonna have to see a pretty good jump from him. And I know a lot of people are expecting that. I am one of them. So it is going to be interesting to see, if he can maintain this level or improve, because we all know that when you become a first or second target in an offense, you're going to start to see better defenders. He's going to line up in all these different places on the field. Defenses and defensive coordinators are going to start to game plan against him. He's going to see less of a linebacker and more of a safety and corner at times based on where he lines. Because if Brady wants to make him the focal point of the offense, or at least, the primary weapon when they need, got to have a play, they're going to start to see different types of schemes and schematics against him, which will make Joe Brady have to work that much harder to get him open. And he's going to have to do some different things. We're going to talk about it in the film room tonight. We're going to show you how other coordinators move their guys around, how other coordinators scheme things up, because Joe Brady, you talk about it all the time. They're really putting all of their eggs in his basket, and Josh Allen is supposed to be that point guard for Joe Brady. It's going to be difficult to make Kincaid, a tight end, a focal point. As much as we want it to happen, it's gonna cause Joe Brady to have some headaches at night, because it's gonna be very difficult.
Yeah, and there are things that he can do in terms of alignment, in terms of motion, and trying to free him up. And, to kind of piggyback off your point, I think that's where it lies on Brady. And another thing I think of too is how important it is for the rest of that supporting cast to also be effective, because so much of that mismatch creator piece is tied to, like you talk about, personnel, right? When he comes on the field, does that coordinator have to say, like, okay, do we got to get out a nickel? Do I got to bring in another safety? Am I bringing in a linebacker? Or can you simply just say, you know what? We're not really worried about anyone else. Let's put our number one corner on him. Or yeah, we can put our slot corner on him. Or you know what we can do? We can just bracket him because we're not really threatened by anyone else, and we can kind of take him away as we see fit. Now, that can get murky for a defense. Again, going back to the Joe Brady piece, depending on alignment and motion, the other things that you can do. But that's what's so fun, I think, about this, the chess match nature of it from a football perspective, is that inherent mismatch that a tight end can create, especially like Dalton Kincaid, who is a functional blocker and is an outstanding pass catcher, which doesn't really give that defense that tell when he's in the game.
Right.
How do they defend him? How do the Bills counter that defending of him? And then who else can eat off of that? Because if someone doesn't, if there isn't that other threat opposite of him, even if Kincaid balls out like we think, by like week 4 or 5, defenses can just be like, you know what? No one else is really doing anything. Yeah. Yep. Let's just put more resources to Dalton Kincaid, and he'll have that gravity that we like to talk about. But if that gravity doesn't result in someone else stepping up and filling those voids and those spaces, then it becomes kind of you're dead in the water, sitting duck type territory.
Right. And, you heard him talk about wanting to get faster, wanting to get stronger. And I think that's for several reasons. We talked about the man coverage stuff, so we won't rehash that. The Bills saw a lot of man. They're expecting Dalton Kincaid to see a lot of man, a lot of press, a lot of jam. And when you talk about becoming a focal point or a go-to guy, Kincaid's going to see tighter coverages. He's going to see tighter catch points. And that last year, he did pretty good when you're talking contested catches. He had 5 receptions out of 9. So the sample's really low. It's 55.6%, which is really good contested catch rate. But again, once that sample goes up, because you're becoming a focal point of the offense, those windows are tighter. Those catch points are tighter. And he's got great hands. He's got good size. He's got all those tools. But how will that fare when the sample goes up? Will he be able to maintain that, contested catch rate, or will guys be bodying him and being more physical with him, throwing off his route stem, throwing off his rhythm, throwing him off his game at the catch point? That's to be seen. We're going to have to see how defenses adjust to him, how they change, their coverages and their leverage on him. Now that he's really moving up when you're talking that team target percentage again.
And so much of that too ties back into how defenses choose to cover him, or who they choose to cover him with, because how he functions at the catch point, contested or not, it's determined so much by who's he going up against. Is it the team's number one corner? So if that's the case, they probably have some really good combination of size, speed, ball skills, technique. Is it a slot corner or a nickel? Is it a linebacker or a safety? And each one of those present inherent advantages in a variety of ways. I mean, we saw it down the stretch, like Kincaid's running past Kyle Duggar because Duggar just doesn't have the speed to stick with Kincaid vertical, or what he did against that, I think it was that Tampa 2 look against the Steelers in the playoffs, where he just hits the seam and splits it. And you see that speed and that verticality that he has, and and how that impacts defenses and how it helps the Bills offense. And then Also within that, how defenses choose to match, who they choose to match him with, and the Bills' personnel groupings by extension.
Mhm.
Also tying into that is formations, alignments, how Joe Brady chooses to align on every single snap. I've continued to talk about, condensed formations and what that could potentially do from an advantage standpoint for the Bills this year, but where he's aligned from a general standpoint, inline, slot, out wide is going to go a long way towards determining his production and his role. And when you put him amongst the landscape and the backdrop of other productive tight ends in the NFL, it's really interesting to see because, Erik, it puts into perspective how these
Mhm.
other good offenses, these other tight end centric offenses, how they maximize those guys.
Right. And so we're looking at some of those alignments. So the slot percentages and the out wide percentages, courtesy of True Media. And you can see him almost dead center above Evan Ingram when you're talking slot percentage, but below Mike Gesicki, below Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is blowing everyone else
Ridiculous.
away, in the slot 70% of the time. And you can see again, Kyle Pitts is the leader when it comes to being out wide, which is not surprising. He's pretty much a wide receiver as well. But you can see some of those names and where he stacks up and how they use. And so primarily he was in the slot right around 50% of the time. That's not surprising given his time in college, what he does well, what they asked of him last year. But you're gonna see in some of this film how other teams use their tight ends, especially some of these guys on this list. And this is where the conversation for me begins about maximizing him. How do you get the most out of him? Yes, the slot is one, bumping him outside a little bit is also another. But this year, when we're talking that, multi-dimensional offense, it's not going to be about the new names at wide receiver
Mm,
or the amount of the tight end names that are healthy now, and Dawson Knox coming back, or
mhm,
even Q Morris getting some reps. It's
mm,
going to be a personnel talk. It's going to be an alignment discussion. And this is what's so exciting because, I mean, it's something that we've talked about in prior years. And I don't know if it's just because of injuries or it becomes like it's not a point that of emphasis is heavier sets, man. So
mhm,
yes, 12 personnel, 21 personnel. If the Bills want to use those personnel, like you said, how are the defenses going to match? Are they going to match with base defense, 3 linebackers, nickel? Are they going to go to 6 defensive backs and play more of a dime or even dollar looks? That's going to be important because if defenses decide to go heavier because the Bills can run out of those heavy sets, which they've shown that they
mhm,
can run pretty well, at least efficiently.
mhm,
Then Dalton Kincaid will damn near be the most gifted offensive player if you're talking having 3 linebackers on the field. Like
mhm,
he's gonna be very difficult to defend. Dawson Knox, those short passes on slide routes, those little screens or little short passes to him that he can get going with the ball in his hand. He becomes dangerous. We saw it against Miami last year in the low red zone where he took that little 5-yard pass and just ran right through the defender for a touchdown. The Bills become very dangerous when they go heavy, but execute the passing game because of the personnel they have at some of those bigger positions like tight end.
Yeah, and I'm excited for that tight end aspect and also the receiver piece as well because with the combination of size and athleticism and pass catching ability and run blocking ability that they
Mhm.
have in both the tight end room and the wide receiver rooms, you can get really creative. Like you can be in 12 personnel but be in more of like an 11 personnel true spread type of formation or alignment. You could be in an 11 personnel, but be more condensed and tight and run duo because you've got Keon Coleman and you've got Matt Collins and MBS and even
Right.
Shakir, who improved as a blocker down the stretch. So you can be in these personnel groupings and be able to get to a good amount of the passing menu and run game menu without having to change your personnel grouping. And then that defense has to figure out, okay, like how do we match? Because it's not like, oh, they're in 12, they're running the ball. Oh, they're in 11, it's a pass. The Bills can get to a lot. And when you put that into perspective with other trends from defenses, or I'm sorry, good offenses, like the Niners, for example, 47% of their snaps last year came with 2 backs on the field. That's because Kyle Juszczyk is this awesome, Swiss Army knife at
Mhm.
fullback for them. 60% of their snaps came with either 2 tight ends or 2 running backs on the field. The Ravens, 26%, 21 personnel rate, 10%, 20 personnel rate, 12%, 12 personnel rate. So heavier, like we like to talk about. And then you've got teams
Right.
like the Lions who are going to look into
A
60.
lot.
Yeah, right. 64% 11 personnel usage rate second in EPA per attempt for running backs on the ground, fourth in rushing DVOA. And so much of that is what Laporta did, but also bigger bodied wide receivers in their 11 personnel grouping like Josh Reynolds and Donovan Peoples-Jones that allow them to get creative in 11. But then when they go heavy, one of those guys is Sam Laporta. It's all these mismatched buttons and creators that good offenses and more importantly, good offensive coordinators take advantage of and maximize.
Yeah, and so let's look at some of this. Again, alignments, personnel, scheme. Watch where Laporta is lined up on this play here as we start the film portion of this breakdown. So I have it labeled. You have an extra lineman right here on the field, right? And then you have you have two tight ends, one right there, and then Laporta is in a nasty split, essentially a what, Anthony?
Quasi X.
Quasi X. He's pretty much a wide receiver here. Again, these are things the Bills can do with Kincaid if they want. So they're in I formation off the bat. And then once again, quasi X, you got the cool personnel. You have a really nice play action pass. You have a window right over the middle. And this is what I'm talking about. When you become a focal point, when you become one of those dogs like Laporta was last year, you're going to see corners. You're going to see tight windows. Look at this catch over the middle versus the Broncos defense. It's in traffic. Again, you're going to have to make these type of catches. I want to say Laporta had like 25 or 26 contested catches last year. This is one of those areas of the field the Bills have to be better at, over the middle. And they can do that with Dalton Kincaid, whether he's in the slot, not in line, but in the slot, or even out wide, like you see Laporta here.
Yeah, his ability to function over the middle of the field, speaking about Laporta, like it's tied to his athleticism and the size and that functionality. But you can see Kincaid work this area of the field. We saw him work it a lot at Utah. But my favorite piece with it, you talked about it initially, like not only him in that quasi X, but that nasty split and that alignment. So many of the good offenses last year had low formation width. The San Francisco 49ers had the lowest formation width in the league. The Rams second lowest, the Dolphins third lowest, the Texans fourth lowest, and the Detroit Lions had the fifth lowest. And all of those offenses, minus the Texans, were top 10 overall in terms of EPA per play. Having those alignments, what it does to a defense, how it throws them off and limits tells, and then limits what they do from a coverage standpoint or mitigates it, also adds to that emphasis in terms of how they can maximize the tight end and maximize that matchup.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So again, when you're that dude, like Kelce is here, you're going to see some corners. You're going to see some, and coincidentally, this is against the Broncos as well. You're going to see corners. You're going to see some of those safeties, not necessarily linebackers. And you got to be able to play on the line of scrimmage at times, like that quasi X with Laporta, but also make tough catches. But watch this route by Kelce right here over the middle of the field. Watch him work the route. Check the nuance on this route as he is up against Patrick Surtain. Runs that over out. But again, look at this catch up and over this guy. So that concentration. Now you got Surtain closing in from the backside here, but he's still able to make that catch at the catch point. These are the type of things that the Bills are going to rely on Kincaid to do. And again, he's got the size, he's got the athleticism, and he definitely has the hands. But we're just gonna have to see it against really better competition. Like I said, it gets sometimes against top tier corners if defenses start to defend him like a primary, like an alpha.
Yeah, Pat Surtain, despite the fact that he's getting beat on this play, is legitimately one of the best corners in the entire NFL. And this past season for Kansas City, everybody and their mother talked about it, like how poor the receiving options were for Kansas City, really until Rashee Rice started to emerge a little bit. And so you're sitting there, if you're Denver, and you're putting Surtain on Travis Kelce because you don't really have that threat from a receiver standpoint that you're worried about, especially here, Sky Moore and Justin Watson. And so if you're Kelce or if you're Kincaid, if you want to play this game, like you got to beat a true number one corner. And yeah, look how Kelce just sets that up. Yes, gets square to Surtain, as you highlighted his route there. And
I don't know where he's going.
Exactly.
You really don't know. It's a two-way go.
Exactly. He creates a two-way go in the middle of the field in the intermediate by getting square, and then pops that inside. And despite not being the most fleet of foot or the fastest, it's the angle that he takes. It's the leverage that he creates. He's been doing this for so much and so long within his career and creating that space. And I don't want to put too much praise on Kincaid or set a super high bar, but Kincaid has flashes of that. He understands spacing. He understands leverage. And I also wanted to point out in that previous play with Kansas City, multiple tight ends. You see 83 in there. You see Kelce in there. So you got two tight ends, What else do you have? Low formational width. Again, leaning into these aspects that you can potentially see from the Bills this year based on league trends and based on other teams who know how to maximize and utilize their tight ends.
And yeah, we did see some of this. That, you just said that a second ago. We saw it in the playoffs against the Steelers. Extra offensive lineman right here. You have crazy personnel, unorthodox personnel, and backup running backs and backup wide
How
receivers.
dare you insult Andy Isabella like that? He's the GOAT.
But you get man coverage. You get Erik Rowe, a safety, on Dalton Kincaid. And this is a play we broke down several times, and we'll have different variations of it here tonight. But you see that split action, split flow across the formation, kind of like you saw the tight end sift across the formation of the Chiefs. And there's that physicality right at the line of scrimmage. You see that defender get his hands on Kincaid, and you want to see Kincaid create a little more separation, but he does at the catch point with one hell of a throw down the field from Josh Allen, a short from the end zone angle. These are the type of things the Bills are going to rely on, not just play action here, but man coverage. That he's going to have to beat man coverage. He's going to have to beat safeties and corners. He's going to have to do it, not just at the line of scrimmage, but at the catch point with his hands and strong hands and concentration like you see here.
Yeah, this is actually like a good coverage from Rowe. He's in a decent position. Kincaid creates a little bit of separation. Like you said, you'd like to see him create a little
Like
bit
a
more.
little push off right there to
Yeah.
create that separation, horizontally.
Yeah, I like him to lean into Rowe a little bit more and then snap out of it, or like you said, like get some kind of extension or push. But he creates enough because of his athleticism and his speed. But Rowe's able to catch up, and he's right there in position. He's on Kincaid's back, and he gets his inside arm in front into the hands. That's a tremendous freeze frame by you. Well done. Kincaid looks this ball in. Tremendous eyes. He's got the hands. Erik Rowe is right there to punch that ball out, to knock it down, to rip it out. But you see the concentration, the hand strength, and then Kincaid basically reels it in with that one hand, left hand. Just a tremendous catch from a focus standpoint, from a hand standpoint by Kincaid, and an aspect that this Bills team is going to have to lean into based on him, potentially from a perception standpoint, being that target option number one for this team in 2024.
All right. And to kind of, build upon that, this is something that Brady's going to have to do to get the ball to Kincaid. We broke this play throughout the year in the film room, much like that play against the Steelers. You're going to see, that split action across the formation, but instead of coming across the field, they run that sail, kind of that flood concept against the Dolphins here. So the Bills are going to have to build these layers into plays and concepts if they want to get Kincaid going. Again, it's not the easiest thing to scheme up and draw up plays for tight ends, because again, there's such a focal point for a defense when it comes to matching up personnel and matching up coverages. But when you have a guy like Kincaid, you want him to be the focal point. So you have to work that much harder to build layers to make plays look the same, so that when that moment of truth comes, where is he going to go inside or outside? Like you saw Kelce set up in that route. This time you see Kincaid go outside on that sail route, on that corner route. And now you get an explosive play.
Absolutely. And I feel like we don't go one film room episode without showing some sail concept or sail route in some way, shape, or form. Allen loves it. He's a great thrower of it. I don't have anything too much to add on that piece. The one piece I wanted to talk about in this specific play is you see the extra offensive lineman for the Bills, plus the presence of Dalton Kincaid. Yep, there's Edwards highlighted right there. Notice how the Dolphins have chosen to match this personnel. You've got Van Ginkel, number 43, and you've got Melvin Ingram highlighted right there. Yep. And then you've also got two linebackers. So look at all the heavier type of dudes that are there. And even when you see Kincaid get put in motion, who's lined up, head up on him? It's friggin' Melvin Ingram, who granted doesn't end up staying on him, but that's a mismatch piece. Ingram goes to the flat. Duke Riley flows over the top. That's another mismatch piece where, again, and not even necessarily to knock Miami, Kincaid versus pretty much, I would say, majority of linebackers in the league is going to be advantage Dalton Kincaid. And that's another thing that we were just talking about, like being in certain personnel groupings can dictate to the defense how they choose to match. And you can, especially when you go with a sixth offensive lineman and how good the Bills were at running out of those six offensive lineman looks, the defense is going to have to be like, crap, they can run out of this really well. We got to match it with an extra linebacker. We got to go more base. We got to go heavier or bigger to match that run threat. And then the passing starts to open up a little bit because of the presence of Kincaid, even though he can also function as a blocker.
And here's a similar play against the Jets. And but again, it's layered. It's a different look. And you just have two hitches or curls at the top of the screen. You get that jet action with the extra offensive lineman to give Allen a little time. There's the play action fake, and you just see the middle of the field open for Kincaid. And again, this has been our favorite play, and really the favorite play for Kincaid last year. It's something they did a bunch of, and something I expect them to carry over again, but add different layers, use different personnel, but attack similar areas of the field.
Yeah, and like you said, making things look similar, like the initial presentation, but then throw Stephon Diggs in motion, or, instead of sending Kincaid on the over like in the previous play, you have him break it out and run that sail route. All of these opportunities for Brady to marry the run in the pass, make everything look like everything else, limit tells, add deception, limit your predictability. Those are all the type of buttons and that he's going to have to push, and the levers that he's going to have to press, because from what it looks like now on paper, no disrespect, this Bills offense isn't filled with just, one-on-one ISO ball guys who can just go get you a bucket. Like, Brady's going to have to get creative in terms of like a good basketball lineup. Instead of just having everybody clear out and letting Kobe go one-on-one, you got to have an offense with a lot of off-ball screens and movement to try and generate open shots for dudes. And it can happen. It's just, like we said, that ceiling is on Joe Brady for this offense in terms of really getting this group to that spot.
Yeah, and one other area that Brady can get Kincaid going, we kind of saw some of it already, and that's with play action. And we talk about tight ends all the time. If someone asked how's his blocking, actually he got better as the year went on. Some inconsistencies on certain types of blocks, but overall, I thought he played, when we're talking inline, especially because he can block in space. Like,
Yeah.
put him in slot, put him on the move. He can block that way. Inline, it was up and down as expected, which is why you didn't see him in line all that often, especially if they were going to run the ball. If they did, is usually a backside cutoff block or a hook block. But tight ends are so important to play action game. And I think that Brady can maximize him even more on some of those delayed releases, kind of like what we saw in the Raiders game, where he initially is blocking and then just leaks out. The Niners do it better than anyone with Kittle, because they have such a strong run game and game presence.
Ravens do it good too with Andrews and that keeping him in.
Yeah, and they can do it from more of shotgun type formations too, that make it fun. But I thought last year, towards the end of the year, they did a better job of using play action and really stretching the field with Dalton Kincaid at times. Some of those plays you already saw. But early on, man, Dorsey, it was just disappointing. And maybe they're just easing him in, Kincaid in, but it was always like some kind of chip release, and he was just a check down or security blanket on these play action plays. But they, again, started to layer later in the year. He was 8th in targets in play action, which is kind of surprising, all things considered, last year. So what about the play action game, or where can they attack with Kincaid when it comes to play action?
Man, I really want to tie it into the middle of the field and the intermediate in particular, like that ability, especially pairing it with how good their run game was last year, not just the Josh Allen run game, but the regular, running back run game. They were 7th in EPA per attempt last year. Sucking in those second level defenders and giving Kincaid that much more space between the safeties on the back end who are putting a cap on everything, and those linebackers and potential nickel defender, slot defender, big nickel, whatever, star, whatever you want to label it, apex, just throwing out every single terminology. Create as much space as you can in that spot. That's where I really want to see Kincaid eat, and where I think the biggest opportunity is, because I don't know how many explosives are going to be generated from a downfield perspective, like 20 plus yard, air yard throws down the field based on how the pass catchers are aligning. So I'm looking for more chunk plays to be generated in the intermediate that could lead to some yards after catch, or just, a 15 or 16 air yard completion that ends up being like a 22 or 23 yard gain. And I really look for Kincaid to be that major factor in that, with that play action game, especially with how he succeeds on those over routes, and how you can tie it in by having him stop and snap and break it back, and how you can kind of lean into your own tendency and manipulate defenders. So I'm really looking towards middle of the field, intermediate areas, kind of going away, between the hash and the numbers and attacking that space. I would also love if they did it out of some pistol. I would love just more pistol. I'm going to continue to yell that for the entirety of this offseason.
One of these years, we're going to manifest it. I mean, if we keep saying it, we're going to be right one of these years.
That's why I'm saying it. Like, I feel like if we keep yelling it enough, eventually the football gods will be like, okay, let's just make Joe Brady put this into the offense significantly. But yeah, that's what I'm looking for from the play action game, especially if they can marry their run and pass looks a little bit better. I just think it's a natural next step or evolution for this offense based on how they're built.
And so, real quick, play action last year for the Bills and other tight ends across the league. Yards per route run on the left, EPA per target on the bottom. Play action only. You can see he's just above average when you're talking yards per route run when the Bills ran play action, but below average in EPA per target. So this is an area they can be better in my
Yeah.
opinion. You see some of the big names: George Kittle, Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, are in that upper right quadrant that you want to be in. And so you can see there is definitely room for improvement in this area. And again, it kind of comes back to the personnel discussion, because if you go back and watch his Utah film, I watched it just last hour, like all the film I had from him at Utah, they ran multiple tight end sets,
Yes.
12, 13 personnel. And they did those, again, delayed releases off, play action boots. They had him on slide routes underneath the line of scrimmage, coming across and getting him out in the open on the perimeter. The Bills could really do more in that department. And if I think you and I are both on the same page, we expect a little change in the run game. Maybe I expect a little more zone sprinkled in so that they can get Josh Allen under center or pistol, maybe. So that they can run some of that long play action, some of that Shanahan, McVay stuff, so they can get not just Josh on the perimeter, but get guys like Kincaid on the perimeter, get Samuel with his speed on the edge, and being able to take advantage of that yards after catch.
I'm in lockstep with you in that. I want to see more. You said one multiple times this episode that I really am looking for from a play action standpoint this year. Those slide routes, whether it's to Kincaid, whether it's to Curtis Samuel, like those easy, quick little, let's run this play action pass that looks exactly like the run that we, gashed a team with a couple times. Hey, we've been working mid zone. Now it's actually a play action boot. Samuel's coming across on that slide. Kincaid's coming across on that slide. Make it easy for Josh Allen. Let me dump it down around the line of scrimmage and let my guy go take advantage of the space that we created. I second that notion. Again, anything that you can do. Stephon Diggs was such, for as much maligned as he is now amongst Bills fans, he was very like, just go put him anywhere. He's probably going to win and he'll get open and we'll figure it out from there. With what the Bills have now, you do have to push all those buttons, like moving them, whether it's like jet motion or orbit motion or shifts at the last minute or tear motion, fast motion, however you want to like label it, anything and everything. Like I don't want to say the Bills offense has to be gimmicky because I don't mean it like that, but I really do think they have to take advantage of all these little leverage creators in the pass game to try and scheme everybody open.
All right, so let's look at, you saw the Steelers game with that play action. You saw how the Bills kind of got, Kincaid down the field off of play action, but from shotgun. Here is Josh under center. You have 12 personnel on the field, and you're making it look like a duo run. You're bringing the wide receiver Shakir right here, making it look like you're just going to run that duo run right here off the right side of the offensive line. But this route just always comes up when we're talking Kincaid in the middle of the field and how well he can actually run routes. He turns around Bentley there so easily, man. This is what the Bills need to do. Look at that long play action fake. Look at the depth of the pocket for Josh. And then you're getting that matchup where Kincaid's making it look like he's running this over out versus Bentley. You're going to see him just peel off and just really turn Bentley around in the middle of the field. And now you have a nice first down over the middle.
It's so funny how much space there ends up being for Kincaid, considering that this is only a 2-man route against 5 defenders in coverage. And it's a testament to the call, the design, we talk about it all the time with Josh Allen, like his play action mechanics are so tremendous with how he hides the ball. He's, you talked about him being a magician back there. And then, yeah, it's Kincaid. Like this is a pure advantage mismatch all day for Dalton Kincaid. Bentley is not a pass defending linebacker. He is a downhill fit the run thumper.
And Anthony, not to interrupt you, but this is very reminiscent of that Kelce route you saw and the nuance and different breaks in this route. Kincaid made this look like he was going across early, and look at what it did to Bentley. He made him drop his hips and break down, but he eventually, again, bends it back outside. Just a sick route from Kincaid.
Absolutely. His route running, I think, yeah, I don't know, it got better as the year went on, but he came in, we talked about it in camp, like he came in as a healthy route runner. And so he starts to make it look like he's going over the middle, and you saw how it causes Bentley to break down a little bit. Then he gets north and south. and gets vertical and gets square as he pops it outside. And look at his head, look at his eyes, look at his body language. He's selling like he's going vertical. And because he already broke down Bentley's in chase mode. Like, I got to get on my horse, get on that hip, and get upfield. Look at that, the body language, and now he's leaning back inside. So Bentley's thinking he's going vertical. Oh, he's running that over. Let me start to turn. Look where Bentley's head is, where his shoulder lean is, everything about his body. And Bentley's going upfield. Bentley's trying to go across the field, and then Kincaid puts his foot in the dirt, and look at that separation, almost from hash to hash, because Kincaid sold it beautifully. That's that type of deception and route nuance, body language, eyes. Like, these are all the things we scout for when it comes to the college football season in terms of like evaluating what a prospect is. That's just a beautiful, technically fluid and athletic route from Dalton Kincaid against the guy that really doesn't have a prayer against him in coverage.
Again, tight, condensed set, making it look like a run, and a run that's just downhill. And so you see the Patriots, they're stacking the box. Look, they have an odd man front, a 5-man surface right here. And again, they're expecting, I think they're also expecting more of a zone type run here, because this is that flex defense that they used against the Rams in the Super Bowl a few years ago to kind of shut down that zone running scheme. But then Josh points out Duggar, and that's why Shakir comes in. Now this, all intents and purposes looks like a dual run, but they run again more of a zone track off this and just get the ball to Kincaid. I want more of this. I want more of Josh under center running play action. We saw it a bunch, last year, and when they did run it, he was super effective. But honestly, they probably could have run it even more, Anthony.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about it so much like mid-year, and I think it upticked a bit under Brady, but I remember the difference being negligible because it was one of the points that I remember people were like, Dorsey sucked. Look how much more play action Brady was using. It was like, not really. It wasn't too much. I thought there'd be more play action, especially from the under center standpoint. That's it too. Like, we broke down the under center play action advantages statistically and schematically. Thought it would be incorporated more. Who knows? Maybe it'll be this year along with some more motion. But it also just, not even just from a schematic standpoint, Josh, when does the under center play action, it just seems like it kind of sets him up mechanically. Like, he's just in a good rhythm. His feet, his feet, his shoulders, his eyes, everything is nice and calm and compact and controlled, and he fires. Like, you don't really see him get outside himself from a mechanic standpoint. And so that's a nice like added bonus as well. And Josh crushes it when it comes to play action and under center play action in particular. And then again, when you add it with these condensed looks in the run game, it just seems like a natural, again, next step and evolution for the Bills to further lean into, given how the league is going, given how their personnel is built from a roster standpoint, and given the success they saw in some of these areas last year in 2023.
Yeah, you put Josh Allen under center, you bring in the formations. They're not, again, you talked about formation width. You bring in heavier personnel, you bring everyone up near the line of scrimmage, you get those single high safety looks. And then that's when you pass. And that's when you run play action. And you get those vertical shots. And you get those one-on-ones. You get those matchup advantages with a guy like Dalton Kincaid. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. Like, I better see it. It just, if not, you're failing as a coordinator, in my opinion. If you're not doing those things with Kincaid and with this offense, again, now decentralized, that it's time to start doing that more, because Josh is so good, as you said, mechanically, from a rhythm standpoint, and from a yards per attempt. I think he's almost 3 yards per attempt more off of play action than just regular drop back passes. So one area that they can use some of the stuff we just talked about is in the most important area of the field, and that's the red zone. And I thought when it came to the red zone last year, Dorsey and Brady, it was lackluster. I think they failed in many ways, especially if we're talking from a tight end perspective. They didn't do enough to get their tight ends open for so many years. The Bills were very good at getting tight ends open, scheming tight ends open. And it felt like last year it just was a wash. And that's definitely an area that they can be better. And one way to do that is to maximize Kincaid and use him in this area, use his athleticism, again, his catch radius, his concentration, his hands, and from those formations and different looks and concepts like we talked about earlier.
shudder to think in a positive way of like what Dable could do with Kincaid and Knox, knowing what he did with like Tyler Croft in the low
Right.
red zone all the time in terms of scheming those tight ends open. And yeah, that's just you're going to have an inherent advantage in the red zone, especially in the low red zone, because you have Josh Allen and the threat he is with his legs
Mhm.
combined with his arm, the athleticism, everything. And then when you have these mismatch creators, it should force you into that area even more in terms of putting a defense into a bind. But when you pull up this chart, Erik, with these red zone numbers, we got EPA per target on the left axis there on the Y, and then team target percentage on the bottom there on the X. And you just see it's, especially from an average standpoint, a bit underwhelming when it comes
Yeah.
to Dalton Kincaid, especially in comparison to a lot of the other, tight ends we'd like to see him in the conversation with.
Yeah, look at the team target percentage for Kittle, Andrews, Laporta, Kelce, and Komet. Dalton Kincaid was at 13% team target percentage in the red zone last year. He had 9 targets, 5 receptions for a negative 0.35 EPA per target. And so you look at the touchdowns. Laporta led with 9 in the red zone, Kelce with 7, Andrews with 6. Cole Komet I threw up in there because he had 5.
Mm.
Kincaid had 0 touchdowns
And
in
that's
the
the
red
thing we
zone.
talked about last year. Like we were like, man, an easy way to get Kincaid involved, like third downs and red zone work because of the mismatch creation piece. And it just neither coordinator really tapping into it is definitely something I was disappointed about. Sorry to interrupt. I got excited.
No, no, that's fine, man, because it just when I went back and watched all these targets, Anthony, I was pissed. I was so pissed, dude. Let me bring some of these plays up because again, 9 targets, 5 receptions for 27 yards. Watch some of these plays. There's no creativity at all. And again, it's not just Dorsey. These first few clips are Dorsey. A lot of times what they do is they bring Kincaid across and just run an out route with him. Like you see right here, and all the defense is doing is just switching right there. You see that's a fourth down conversion. So not a bad play, but this one right here really
I remember
makes me
this one.
angry. This
Yes.
one really makes me angry. We're going to break that down later and why it makes you angry. But these are pretty bad plays schemed up in the most important part of the field. And it's an area that I know the Bills offense is looking at and looked at this offseason at getting better at.
And this is an aspect of, again, that mismatch creation piece where you really like to see it be reflected. And you hit it like on the head with the lack of creativity. This is something where I'd love for Joe Brady just to study what Ben Johnson does in the low red zone with the Lions and with Laporta and just run everything that they run. Just copy it,
Yeah.
scribble it down, and
Yeah.
do that exact same stuff. Like that's the one I keep leaning into the most in terms of not just because it's from the same draft class, but I just feel like it's harder to emulate. Like for as good as Shanahan's scheme is, I mean, the Niners have Debo and Ayuk and
Right.
McCaffrey and Kittle and like all these weapons, and even Jennings, who got rewarded with a contract this year, like isn't a bad wide receiver 3 compared to who everyone else he's paired against. The Ravens offense has been such a unicorn for years under Roman, became a little more normalized under Munkin, but still their multitude of tight ends that they have, plus Pat Ricard, allows them to lean into more unique areas. I feel like what the Lions do, and I'm not
Mhm.
knocking Detroit with this, I feel like that's the most replicatable aspect of an offense in terms of these successful tight end offenses. Maybe the Chiefs a little bit too, that the Bills could emulate to utilize Dalton Kincaid.
And every team is studying Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
Every aspect of his offense, they're studying him. And this is why. Again, low red zone here, 13
Quasi X.
personnel. 13 personnel, 1 running back, 3 tight ends, quasi X, Laporte at top of the field. And this is nothing special, but just watch how they get him off the backside of the formation. Nasty alignment here, and how the timing of this throw is on point. But Laporta reels it in. It's on his back hip. He reels it in. These are the type of plays that, we're going to have to see Josh Allen make. He's going to have to throw into some tight windows this year. If you're talking, guys that separate, yeah, you're going to use some of those guys that have speed to separate. But some of these route running type guys like Kincaid, you're going to have to throw in rhythm. Look at the eye discipline from Goff, looking this way to hold this safety and then firing it in the window. That's not necessarily Josh's, go-to strength, throwing in time on rhythm, but he's going to have to be better at it. And again, they're putting all their eggs in the basket of not just Joe Brady, but that Josh Allen can deliver these type of plays in rhythm on time to their tight end, Dalton Kincaid.
And that's my biggest talking point with it. Like, and anytime we talk about Ben Johnson and the Lions offense, and we saw so much throughout the season of Bills fans just saying, like, oh, get Ben Johnson, get Ben Johnson, get Ben Johnson. And not that it couldn't work, but so much of this Lions offense is a timing based, rhythm based offense. And you highlighted in this play, like it's a tremendous catch by Laporta. But the biggest takeaway for me is what Goff does. Like immediately on the snap, he looks to the right, he holds that safety, like you said, and then the throw on time in rhythm. Yes, it's a little bit more on that back hip, but also maybe Goff leads him there because he
Yeah.
knows there's that post safety
Post
in the middle
safety.
of the
Yep.
field. Exactly. Like you have that aspect where you have to be on point with everything. And to the point you just made, that's not necessarily Allen's game. He's not that he can't throw on time and in rhythm, but he's more of this chaos creator, embrace it, athletic quarterback than he is this on time precision passer like Jared Goff has to be because
Yeah.
he doesn't have any athleticism.
That's his
No
game. Yeah.
disrespect.
No, the anticipation, all the little things about being a quarterback, he's got to make up for the lack of athleticism and things that Josh Allen obviously has
Yeah.
naturally. But again, Ben Johnson, low red zone, scheming up this play. But also, you got to give some props to Laporta on this as well because he works through the contact. But let's start at the top of this play. There's just so much to uncover here. So extra offensive lineman, check. Two tight ends, check. Now again, Kincaid worked on being faster and stronger. Watch Laporta, work through this contact and look at the matchup. This guy's working through the traffic, first of all. But not only that, look who he is. He's an edge defender, number 97. Why is he covering Laporta? Because Ben Johnson got the matchup with this personnel grouping in this area of the field. It looks like run. It smells like run. It's actually a pass. And you see Laporta work through that traffic. These are things that defenses and defenders are going to do to Kincaid, especially in the red zone, the low red zone. They're going to try to get their hands on him. But if Brady can do a good job, like Johnson does here, of getting the matchup they want, and Kincaid can work through that contact and disruption, you'll get easy touchdowns in the red zone, like you see here at Laporta.
And depending on the defense you play, maybe that's not an edge defender. Maybe it's just like that bigger linebacker type. But that's a similar type of look that you're going to get from defenses because of all the pieces you highlighted, Erik, like a physical type of look, the down and distance, the situation. It's fourth down. Montgomery's the running back. You have this offensive line. You have an extra offensive lineman.
Strong.
Exactly. We've talked about this all the time. You've got that 4 strong look and then the eligibles to the side and everything. This is an aspect where, like you said, Joe Brady could really lean into, and it schemes up an opportunity for a linebacker to be matched up on Dalton Kincaid. And who knows, maybe in a different situation, maybe there's some sort of pass off, but because they're in that bunch, that man coverage piece is what results here for the Rams. And Laporta just bangs right through the defensive lineman because he's got the size and strength to do it. And hearing Kincaid talk about, again, like you said earlier, wanting to beat man coverage, but working on his size and his strength to be able to play in these areas. It's not just beating man coverage against, corners. It's going to be beating man coverage against anybody, especially in the low red zone, where if schemed correctly, like you said, you could get a bunch of wild looks that really favors Kincaid and favors the Bills offense.
All right. And so I want to break down this play because it's won by the Chiefs that gets Kelce a touchdown. So you see trips right here, but you get that flow across the formation here by the running back. But just look at the alignment. It's a little tighter than what we'll see here in a minute from the Bills. And watch how that plays into this man coverage pick right here. And then Kelce is able to get outside. You see that pick. You see the leverage now that Kelce has outside because of that alignment versus man coverage. You get that rub. You get an easy touchdown for Kelce. Pretty good scheme by Andy Reid. Are we surprised? No. But all these little details, empty set, they're all tight to the formation. Again, you got a little eye candy too here. But this alignment right here by MVS allows him to set that pick on this defender, but also takes the eyes of this guy inside right there. And you just a little bit of leverage for Kelce. He's going to get in there for the touchdown. And Anthony, I say this because we look at the Bills try to run a similar type play right here versus Tampa Bay. Look at how wide there. And this is really a theme that I picked up on when I watched all of the red zone snaps is that in the red zone, they did a lot of spread game from shotgun. Like, okay, but like you saw the width, you talked about it this entire episode, that width of the formation is a major advantage if you use it properly, especially in the low red zone when you're expecting man coverage. Well, Bills are expecting man coverage. They run a man coverage beater, but they don't realize that all these two guys can do is just switch. And that's exactly what happens as Kincaid comes across a formation. that corner says, hey, we're going to switch. So he switches off of Shakir. He doesn't fall inside like Darius Slay did. And now he's right there to break up the ball. This is the difference between the Bill scheme last year and obviously Andy Reid, one of the best play callers and play designers ever. But these are the little things that Brady can tweak to make a play, efficient, to make a play work. And it's not that difficult. You don't have to completely change the offense. Just have these guys splits down a little lower and don't make it so obvious, because they ran this play several times, as you saw in that 9 target red zone cut up I did a few minutes ago. This is something they had shown on film several times. They had no layers to it. They had no creativity. And that was really why the Bills weren't as good in the red zone last year.
And Jamel Dean, that corner at the bottom of the screen, number 35, he calls it out immediately. Like, you can see his hand gesture. Like, I'm guessing that's their gesture for banjo or switch or whatever. Like, he knows exactly what's happening. Devin White picks up Shakir. He's aligned over Kincaid right now, follows him, sees Shakir coming inside, probably hears Dean barking at him. So he stops, picks up Shakir, and then Dean jumps the little flat route there from Dalton Kincaid and gets a nice break
that to the house.
I was thinking that too. Like, their Bills are lucky this wasn't a pick six. Like, that probably Allen throws this and is already taking off because he sees what's going on, and he gets a little push from Winfield. So maybe Allen might make the tackle, but yeah, that should have been picked at the very least. Maybe even a pick six, probably a pick six. And you nailed it. It comes down to having a wider split versus a tighter split. And it's just an aspect. I want to see the Bills use tighter splits and condensed formations in general, but especially in this low red zone, because of the lack of a tell it creates from an offense for a defense. And you pair that with the power run game that the Bills can exhibit, or even their zone game too. There's so many benefits from that aspect. Also from a man coverage piece overall, like when you've got those tighter splits in the condensed formations and all these bodies are around the line of scrimmage, you can get dudes caught in the traffic and caught in the wash and kind of manufacture some man beaters despite not having guys that are traditionally good against man coverage. So again, another schematic piece that Brady can tap into.
Yeah, another schematic piece that the Bills need to use more of. Again, heavy personnel, 21 personnel. So you have actually, no, this was no, it is 22 personnel. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Running backs up top. So you have running back there, you have Gilliam right here, and then you got 2 tight ends, 22 personnel, but they're in empty here. All right, they're in empty, and this gets the matchup that the Bills want. Baker on Kincaid. Simple route, simple one-on-one win right here by Kincaid on that little whip route, back inside, use that run after catch ability. It seems pretty simple, Anthony. That's the multi-dimension that the Bills want, using different personnel, not relying on Josh to have to carry every single play. Have the personnel dictate the advantageous matchups and make it easy for Josh in many ways.
Yes, and this is one of the things I was talking about earlier. Like, the Bills can be in 11, but be more of like a power type look, condensed formation. You can be in 12 and be more of a spread look. And here they are in 22 with 2 backs, 2 tight ends, and they're in a full spread aspect here. And again, talking about how Miami chooses to match, they've got 4 linebackers on the field, depending on how you classify Bradley Chubb. So you've got Chubb off the edge there. Then you've got Baker. You've got Van Ginkel in the slot over Kincaid. Then you have another linebacker there. I think David Long.
Yep.
Over Reggie Gilliam in the slot towards the bottom of the screen. So again, you've got they've matched with a heavier personnel grouping on defense. And so what does that mean? You've got an advantage with your tight ends. And like you said, then it's Baker on Kincaid, and Kincaid is going to beat most linebackers in coverage. This is that aspect the Bills can really lean into. This is some of the things that the San Francisco 49ers do when they go 22 personnel, because of how good and of an athlete and pass catcher George Kittle is, and how good of a pass catcher and athlete Kyle Juszczyk is. So if you're looking at it, right, if you're that coordinator, you're the one calling it out from the sideline or the booth, you see that personnel come from the sideline and come into the huddle, and you're yelling out, they're in 2020, they're in 22, they're in 22, we got a match. And then the Bills break the huddle, and they're not in a traditional 22 personnel alignment or formation. They're in full spread. And now you're like, crap, we got caught out.
Yeah, we talked about at the top of the show, one thing that Brady can do for the scheming portion of things is, and incorporate him down the field more, which Brady did. I think his average depth of target jumped up 3 yards from like 6 to 9 and change from Dorsey to Brady. And it was because of plays like this. You see him in the slot right here. and you see him just working that bender versus a linebacker, too high structure right here, middle of the field, open. They exploit it with one hell of a throw. They practiced this all week, according to Allen and Kincaid, and they got the look they wanted versus the Steelers, and they're able to run this bender route against the Steelers for the touchdown. Again, using Kincaid vertically, it's something that he did very well in college.
Absolutely. This is an aspect we talked about it because like he was not only was he good vertically at Utah, but he was good on those seam balls and those seam routes, which is something Allen traditionally has not thrown a lot of and isn't the best at. This one is absolutely beautiful. And yeah, my favorite part about this, aside from the throw from Allen, is just them calling it and knowing it. I think this was the one that Allen said, like, as soon as they came out in this look, like Brady hadn't cut off from the
Yeah.
headset yet. He was like, we got it. We got it. Like, so
Yep.
Allen knew the look. This is what they prepped for. This is what they knew. And I love the film study and the preparation combined with the execution, like knowing that, hey, if we do this in this situation, this is their tendency. This is how we can exploit it. And you get Miles Jack as that pole runner trying to carry our number 16 there, Miles
Yep.
Jack, trying to carry Kincaid up the seam. And again, another mismatch for Kincaid because linebackers cannot cover him, especially downfield, especially vertically. And here's some of this footage at Utah where quasi X, cough, quasi X.
Yeah, and you know it's funny because again I went back and watched some of this film. Let's see if I can find the clip because there was a clip of him actually running that bender route versus USC the year before he came out, but I'm not sure I put it in here. Let me see here.
Can't believe you didn't put it in there. Get it together. Just embarrassing. Also, I like this for the play they were about to show against Oregon State as well. Like quasi X from Dalton Kincaid, a la, Sam Laporta and what Detroit is doing, but also notice Kincaid split by that nasty alignment that you talk about, like that lowering that formational width close to the line of scrimmage, all the space it creates outside the hash there, and all the opportunity that, if you're a corner covering him there, he can go in so many directions. He can go across the field. He can go vertical. He can go out. He can go short. You have to honor a lot of aspects, which again plays into, the advantage for the pass catcher and for the offense.
And you heard me talk about, hey, Goff's strengths versus Allen's, and maybe Allen isn't the most anticipatory thrower, especially if we're talking red zone, but he can make up with it with his arm strength, right? Yeah. Like that's the trade-off. But in the red zone, sometimes you got to have that anticipation. Sometimes you got to have that ability to think one step ahead. But whether it's in the red zone or plays like you saw before, a lot of times with Allen, you're going to have a second play. You're going to have that scramble drill. And as you'll see here, this is Kincaid on the backside of this trip set, working the scramble drill or that second play. You see him immediately. He's running the inside route and notices it's all covered over the middle field. What's he do? He breaks it off and he's in the scramble drill. He uncovers. And this is something that he was good at, at Utah, and something that he showed last year. But I think if we're talking red zone, and playing above the scheme, I think this is where you're going to see even more from him if he plays more and becomes more a higher guy when you're talking team target percentage. So watch his play versus the Patriots. That second play, he's working around the edge defender right there. He just runs it out. He's not open, and Allen's looking across the field. So what's he do? He becomes QB friendly. He starts working back towards that side of the field and then realizes Josh is coming back to his side. Here's a contained player. What's he do? He sits down on the numbers and uncovers for his quarterback. Now they're able to move the chains on third down.
It's an aspect that Travis Kelce has eaten off of for years with Patrick Mahomes. And I think it's an underrated aspect in terms of what the Bills lost from last year's offense going into this year. Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis were both tremendous in that scramble drill, that off-script nature that, again, finding green grass, finding open space, getting QB friendly, all those, verbs and phrases and all that kind of stuff. They were tremendously helpful for Allen. He's going to need, new guys to rely upon in that scramble drill. Man, there was multiple from Kincaid in this game. I was thinking of this one against Tampa. I was thinking the other one up the sideline where he kind of mosses the defender a little bit.
It was like an out and up almost. He went to that second play, went up the field.
Yeah, it was like, and I think it was on Levante David too. It was almost like it was, purposeful out and up. And if Kincaid showed it in college, and it just goes hand in hand with him being, the perceived number one pass catcher in this offense. But I think this is an underrated talking point when discussing changes from 2023 versus 2024. Allen is so great off script, but the guys that he relied on when he would go off script are no longer in Buffalo. So he's going to need new dudes to fill that role.
Yeah, and Kincaid, again, he's so good at it when it comes to getting to that second play, to finding voids, whether it's man or zone, as you saw in some of those plays. I think that, especially if we're talking the red zone, it's something that you saw a bunch of from Travis Kelce. I mean, it's something that, like you said, let me see if I can pull up that play, because there was a play that I had queued up. Here it is. Let me bring it up for you. It's something that they do often because, again, Mahomes can just scramble and buy time.
Feels like it
And
happens every year they play the
every year.
Chargers. There's
Yeah.
some back-breaking, like 50-yard off-script scramble drill play to Kelce, let alone like in the red zone. Yeah, they do it with regularity. Like they're just so in sync in that specific aspect.
So watch this, like where he sits his route,
Oh,
he's
it's
pretty much
not real.
covered.
Sorry, real quick here. It's
Oh
not
yeah.
showing.
Hold on.
It's not
Here we
below.
go.
I can see it, but no one else can. So I'm fine with it. But yeah, now we're good.
So watch this. Watch him just curl it up, and he realizes, okay, there's really nothing there. And then, Mahomes is again going into that second play. Watch him just find space. Watch him just sneak behind it. Easy touchdown. Like Kincaid with his background and basketball and whatnot, like he can do these type of things that Kelce does and find these voids. Look at Kelce processing these two guys right here, just finding that void, for the touchdown there. Those are the type of things that Kincaid can do, as we showed in this Patriots cut up right here. I'm excited from that portion because it's something that, like, Dawson Knox, when he was a primary tight end 2 years ago, he did it a bunch. A lot of his yards came. Think about the Kansas City game where he was down the field. It was outside of script, outside of structure, and you got that big touchdown, got behind the safety. Like, a lot of his yards came because of the scramble drill and that second play and being able to uncover. And Kincaid's better than that. And he's more athletic. Like, his ceiling's so much higher, but it's so much fun to think about, his season, his second year coming up, and, the new coordinator and Brady and what he can do to kind of make him one of the top targets, but also what defenses are going to do. Cause like you said, by that fourth and fifth game, they better have a counter, because defenses will start to incorporate some things to slow him down and more resources to slow Kincaid down if he becomes a focal point.
Yeah, and I think that's such an exciting aspect to talk about for this team this year, and potentially worrisome if you're just purely like a Bills fan. But that chess match that's going to exist with this Bills offense for, again, we've talked about trends and offenses and defenses, and the way defenses swung the pendulum in their favor the past several years was really to stop offenses like the Buffalo Bills, like the Kansas City Chiefs. And we saw how the Chiefs were able to pivot and have success these past couple of years. The Bills have pivoted as well in terms of what they developed with their run, but now they're even more so into that pivot with no Stephon Diggs. They've gone with different body types and frames at wide receiver than they have traditionally. It just speaks to a different potential direction or philosophy or identity for this offense this year. And that counter punch relationship, it's going to be super important to see, like you said, and like we've talked about in this episode, because for all intents and purposes, I think you expect it. I think I expect it. I think a lot of fans expect it. Dalton Kincaid is going to be, like you said, that focal point or that funnel, the tip of the spear for the passing attack. And once that becomes concrete, defenses are going to get the opportunity to see how he's become that tip of the spear into that focal point, and then how the Bills answer that continuously. Again, how do you continuously layer and sequence and tweak? And that's why I think the running game is going to be so important, because if you can just move dudes off the ball and create displacement, it makes your job so much easier. It just in a vacuum running the ball, but also how that benefits your passing attack. And then if you can add these wrinkles like, reducing your formational width and having more tighter splits, condensed formations, motion, play action, whether under center or in general, although we would prefer under center and also would prefer some pistol mixed in there as well. I just want to keep manifesting it. Please, pistol. We need like one of those, what is the like the subliminal messages where when people are watching this episode, like there's just something you're not hearing, but it's just like encouraging you to be like, the pistol. And so it'll be exciting to see what they can do, because and I've said it on Disguised Coverage. We've talked about it on the show, like there is potential for this offense to find success. And like we talked about in the lead into this episode, a lot of that is just going to be on Joe Brady to scheme things open. We really haven't seen this offense be schematically dependent as Allen has found success. A lot of the success for this offense has been tied to Josh Allen being Josh Allen. What's our joke on this show? If you open up the Bills playbook, it's just different pictures of Josh Allen doing different things.
Identity, yep.
Yeah, this year it needs to be more, you open the playbook and here's some concepts, here's some actual plays, here's some design, and then Allen has to be that trigger man and that talisman for this offense. But Erik, as we wind down now and start to put a wrap on this episode, anything else that you want to speak on, you want to touch on, anything else on Kincaid, scheme, trends, Brady, OTAs, and the lack of excitement there's been around that? Anything you
Yeah,
got
it
on your
has been
mind before we
disappointing,
go?
right? It like OTA coverage. No offense to the guys that have to cover it,
No.
but they're not giving us much. They're
We
not giving
usually
us
do
much.
episodes this
Yeah.
time of year that are purely just breaking down OTA footage and talking about, like, this is what they're working on. This is what this
Mhm.
player is doing, good and bad. And we really haven't woven in any of that because there really hasn't been anything.
Yeah, there hasn't, especially from a video portion of practice. And I know it's very limited in what they can record during those moments. There was some cool video about, Gable Stevenson and after
Mhm.
practice and McDermott just, sitting there in the back of the end zone, coaching him up and some of the other edge rushers. That was kind of cool. It's good to hear Von Miller's name being thrown out there is, getting would be sacks. So I guess what you call it against Lyle Collins, a backup tackle. But there hasn't been too much. And so I don't want to cling too much to it. I don't want to talk too much about it because it is, again, it's early in the off season. It's only OTAs. It's just pads. And honestly, it's probably like the first or second install. Again, they kind of
Mhm.
introduce all the topics and then just run all the basic stuff. So it's probably early on in the playbook. So there's not too much to grasp from there. The only video portion that I thought maybe caught my attention was every time you see the receivers running drills, I'm seeing a lot of deep hitches and deep comebacks or
Mm.
hinge routes where they're making it look like a go route, a 9 ball, but then they're just pivoting off that outside foot and hinging towards with their backs to the boundary. That route is always there for this offense and Josh Allen. He can hit it from the far hash to the
Mhm.
far sideline. That is something that we saw with him off play action early on in his career from under center. One that stood out was against the Eagles when it was really windy. Like he can hit those plays with, again, under center, multiple tight ends, one-on-one outside, hinge route, deep comebacks. Like I'm seeing a lot of those. And so that is encouraging to me. But aside from that, man, coverage has been kind of soft. It's
Yeah.
disappointing, I should say, because usually we can create entire shows off of some of this training footage, some of the coaching points, but they're limiting us pretty well this year.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but also from the flip side of it, makes me very much excited for when we hit up Bill's training camp and
Oh
finally are able
yeah,
to
the
get our
Nuggets.
eyes to, yeah, like we need it, like, to be, and even more so, I think too, like, not knocking the beat or anybody on it, like, we just did a whole episode talking about like scheme and structure. Like, we've been talking about it all off season. We were talking about it last year. I've talked about it a ton on Disguised Coverage. Like, it's so important, and we don't get really that anyway from the beat, but even more so now, like, it's just so lacking. Like, I'm so excited to get our eyes on practice, on these players, see what's being worked on, and start to put these breadcrumbs and puzzle pieces together just to really kind of see how everything shakes out. Cause it's going to be a very interesting year in terms of, how this team is. I don't think it's a rebuild, but whether it's a reset or a revamp, and how they've, tools things up
Mhm.
offensively. And we haven't even got to the defensive side of the ball where there's some changes as well. Like, there's a
Right.
lot that's going to shake out when it comes to this team and it comes to this roster. And it's unfortunate that we're not getting any, too many peeks into it right now. But as we get to training camp and are able to cover it and put some things out, hopefully we'll be able to, whet our appetite with that, and then the
Mhm.
appetite of our fans and our audience. But nothing else for you, Erik. I got nothing else as well. That'll do it for us here in this episode of the Cover One Film Room. If you have not already, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video, whether you're watching live now or watching post live later. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams. So please drop a like on this video. It goes a long way. It helps us more than you know. If you're listening to this show on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's much appreciated as well. Please rate and review and subscribe to the Cover One Film Room. If you're here on YouTube, turn on notifications for the Cover One Film Room playlist. Subscribe to the Cover One channel as a whole. We have you covered pretty much every single day of the week with varying levels of Bills content and coverage depending on what you're looking for. We have something for anyone and everyone everyone, depending on what your brand of coverage and content is. Major thank you to everyone who rode with us live here in this episode. The questions for each other, for myself and Erik, the back and forth. Again, if you didn't watch live, that's cool too. Thank you very much for your post-live view, listen, download, whatever have you. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about the show, about the brand. That's really how Cover One started, and that organic word of mouth is still tremendously appreciated by us here on the show and the brand as a whole. Until next week for another episode of the Cover One Film Room, that'll do it for us here this week. I'm Anthony Prohaska. That's Erik Turner. We appreciate you folks and hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.